Greetings to all the learners. Welcome to CEC lecture. The topic of analysis is Globalization 4.0, a case study of its opportunities. Dear learners, in the lecture, we shall try to analyze the issues of global governance with respect to Globalization 4.0. We shall try to understand that how Globalization 4.0 presents new challenges as well as new opportunities. In this lecture, we shall specifically have a look at the opportunities presented by Globalization 4.0. To begin with, let us first understand that when we talk about Globalization 4.0, it is just not about having a bearing on global governance, but it has a huge impact with reference to trade systems, industrial systems. This is why it is essential to factor in the opportunities of Globalization 4.0. We all know globalization, the process of interrelations, the process that signifies interdependence. This globalization led to new changes for world. Now, because the idea of interchange, interconnections is nothing new, it always existed in the past. However, Globalization 4.0, when we try to understand it, it has a huge bearing with this idea of interdependence itself witnessing a change. Dear learners, it is very essential at this phase to analyze different phases of globalization. Before we go ahead with that, one must factor in that how globalization has been perceived by various schools of perspectives in international relations. As per the realist perspective, it is the state which is the most important actor. Now, this state, being the most important actor, somewhere works for its national interests. So, as long as states are working in globalization to cater to their national interests, realism says it is fine. However, it looks at states as the only rational actor in the realm of international relations. As per the liberal school of thought, it is the liberty that is most important. International trade governance indeed promotes liberty. The neoliberal perspective in international relation gives emphasis on international organizations, the process of absolute gains, trade regimes amongst others. So, therefore, globalization in this realm is seen as a beneficial aspect of global governance, wherein one has to now focus into account existence of states with other non-state actors. Now, as we are trying to understand Globalization 4.0, it is also very essential to be understood that even the earlier phases of globalization, particularly the earlier phases which were there in the post-Cold War era, looking at how the nature and scale and reach of the process of globalization led to its impact be felt at various corners of the world. No country was isolated or immune from this aspect of earlier version of globalization. The Marxist perspective here needs to be once again studied. Because when we understand the perspectives from the dependency theory, the ideas of Immanuel Wallerstein, herein there is the idea that it is capitalism that is one of the driving aspects of domination with respect to the state systems. Now, dear learners, what we see that we are existing in a world where Globalization 4.0 is being talked about. So, in this lecture now we will be discussing what is Globalization 4.0, how Globalization 4.0 can be helpful to to solve many global issues. We shall look at these opportunities for leaderships, for governments, platform for policy experimentation, public-private action. Each will be targeted to suit different industrial, national and regional agendas. As we just discussed that how globalization signified process of interdependence and interconnectedness. According to the World Health Organization, globalization can be defined as the increased interconnectedness and interdependence of people and countries. Similarly, one also has to understand here that it is generally understood to include two interrelated elements: opening of international borders to increasingly fast flows of goods, services, finance, people, ideas and changes in institutions and policies at national and international levels that facilitate or promote such flows. Dear learners, Globalization 4.0 was the theme for World Economic Forum Annual Meeting 2019 held in Davos, Switzerland in January 2019. Now, as we deliberate in Globalization 4.0, it has very important implications for geopolitics, future of global economy, industrial systems. Globalization 4.0 is a phenomenon driven by technology and the movement of ideas, people and the goods. Now, when we deliberate on Globalization 4.0, any popular article, any popular discussion often terms it as latest stage of globalization. Globalization 4.0 has many dimensions because it involves cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, Industry 4.0. Now, with nations across the globe with their domestic industrial sectors from health to education to other related infrastructural aspects are factoring in artificial intelligence, robotics, Industry 4.0, no doubt Globalization 4.0 then has a very important bearing for global governance. Now, before we understand Globalization 4.0 further, let us understand how Industrial Revolution moved forward. The first Industrial Revolution, 1765, dear learners, we all know it followed the proto-industrialization period. It started at the end of the 18th century to the beginning of the 19th century. Now, as we study first Industrial Revolution, mechanization was one of the most important aspects of it. Agriculture started to be replaced by industry as the backbone of the societal economy. The second Industrial Revolution, 1870, started at the end of the 19th century with massive technological advancements in the field of industries that helped in the emergence of new sources of energy, electricity, gas, oil. So, one finds here that with second Industrial Revolution, there is introduction of steel, use of electricity in factories. The third Industrial Revolution, that is around somewhere 1969 onwards, which is the second half of the 20th century. Rise of electronics, telecommunications, computers amongst others were prevalent here. And herein there was less emphasis on the analog, mechanical technology and more towards digital technology, automation software amongst others. The fourth Industrial Revolution, which is the Industry 4.0. Now, we all know that Industry 4.0, again if we look at the common parlance, popular discussions, Industry 4.0 is being commonly referred as the fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, looking at the current trend of automation, interconnectivity, data exchange in manufacturing technologies to increase productivity. They are some of the hallmarks of Industry 4.0. So, Industry 4.0 is a complex cyber physical systems which synergizes production with digital technology, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data and analytics, machine learning and cloud computing. Then how can Industry 4.0 and Globalization 4.0, which is related to it, be helpful? We all know, first of all, that technology is pervasive now. No sector of any economy is immune to developments and factoring and adjusting developments of technology. Industry 4.0 is providing new technology and equipment, and at the same time giving the right light and framework to strengthen infrastructure, improve connectivity, improve ease of living with that, and ease of doing businesses also. Now, the scale and reach of present day globalization also, as we just discussed, that globalization always existed. Exchange of people, goods was always there in human civilization. However, because of rampant development in technology, information and communication realms, innovations, this explosion of information technology led to shrinking of distances, opening borders, bringing people together. This is why the scale, the nature, the reach of present day globalization is huge as compared to the other. Now, as we are discussing Globalization 4.0, a very important perspective put forward by Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman World Economic Forum, that is, giving the example of how United Nations in the post-Second World War era, herein one gets the example that the international community came together to build a shared future. Now, looking at the contemporary scenario wherein the world has witnessed global financial crisis, there are many other issues of global governance, this need to have a solidarity for a shared future, as Klaus Schwab says, one has to do so again. Now, herein once again, there must be distinction between globalization and globalism. Globalization is a phenomenon driven by technology and movement of ideas, people and goods. Globalism as an ideology prioritizes the neoliberal global order over national interest. Once again, we take the distinction from the perspective of Klaus Schwab. Now, when we are discussing globalization, let's factor in waves of globalization. Globalization 1.0, dear learners, it was pre-World War globalization, wherein there was drop in trade costs, almost no government support or any global governance mechanisms was there. Globalization 2.0, which was post-Second World War, establishment of institutes which were based on rule-based governance. Examples here could be United Nations, the World Bank, World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, amongst others. Globalization 3.0 was when the world witnessed the new world of manufacturing, high-tech realms juxtaposed with low wages, establishment of global supply chains. Now, with this evolution of globalization from globalization 1.0, globalization 2.0, globalization 3.0, we are now at globalization 4.0. If globalization 3.0 was about trade and interdependence, to take the reference from Professor Richard Baldwin, Professor of International Economics at Graduate Institute, Geneva, globalization 4.0 is about swift, universal spread of digital technologies. Now, we will now deliberate towards the opportunities that this new phase of globalization presents for the world governance. We all know that the world is battling climate change, ecological disorder, loss of biodiversity, all of it are big problems, and looking at this, meeting the climate change today requires wide range of different partners to engage, to have different ideas exchange. So what is essential when we are looking at globalization 4.0, to take this reference from this very important perspective once again that we got from wefforum.org, to talk about that how, looking at this, there is a need for a new enabling architecture that presents avenues to promote practical public-private arrangements to help governments file agile, collaborative solutions to look into pressing global problems in our more complex world, which is being rapidly transformed by the fourth industrial revolution. To add here, the World Economic Forum supported United Nations Secretary General's important climate summit in September 2019, which seeks to scale exactly the innovative multi-stakeholder collaboration to tackle climate crisis. Another realm where globalization 4.0 can factor in more opportunities for world governance and issues thereof is that of gender equality. To take reference from this very interesting work that we got from World Economic Forum website, that is, the World Economic Forum pledges for hardwiring gender parity. That is, there is a need for a new toolkit on gender parity 4.0. This will outline the next generation technologies that can address gender bias in the workplace. Gender parity cannot remain an aspirational ideal. Therefore, it is being deliberated, it is being worked out that it must become a reality within our lifetime, creating better outcomes for companies, families, communities, economies. No single organization or country can achieve this aim in isolation. So therefore, one has to look at gender parity 4.0, and the World Economic Forum pledges for hardwiring the gender parity. To quote a very important perspective that Klaus Schwab has pointed out, that globalization 4.0 has only just begun, but we are already vastly underprepared for it. Clinging to an outdated mindset and tinkering with our existing processes and institutions will not do so. So, dear learners, what is essential here is to factor in the challenges that globalization 4.0 presents, and then meticulously, through an innovative mindset, through collaborative multi-stakeholder approach, one has to factor in the opportunities globalization 4.0 presents. As we all know, that one of the biggest criticisms of earlier waves of globalization, specifically globalization 3.0, which was signified by trade and interdependence, was that it led to a division wherein the rich countries gained, whereas the poor countries did not gain. So therefore, in the same light, it is being deliberated that globalization 4.0 must be used to address this challenge of division. To take reference once again with this very important work that we got from World Economic Forum, that 3 strategies for Africa to thrive in the new era of globalization. That is, we all know that addressing Africa's grand challenges requires right knowledge framework. It requires meticulous knowledge brokering, and this also is applicable for several other countries too. Inability to do so in the past, as we just discussed, that globalization 3.0 signified by trade and interdependence, one of its drawbacks was that development outcomes were lopsided. It favored the rich over the poor, and many countries were left behind in this process. Inability to do so in the past has led to wastage of resources. What is essential here is promoting public understanding in science through right communication, through right scientific dialogue. Now, science-driven development will require countries from African continent to tackle big challenges such as climate change, poverty, health, and all of it, will have enormous potential to improve the livelihoods of estimated 2.2 billion people expected to live in Africa by 2050 and counter also the environmental threats thereof. So therefore, globalization 4.0 with this huge technological apparatus, with this huge edifice of industry 4.0 must trickle down, must be made to use of for several areas which were earlier not able to factor in gains of globalization. Therefore, dear learners, as we discuss globalization 4.0 with respect to opportunities, the need of the hour is to design a blueprint from the ground up that can capitalize on new opportunities while prioritizing sustainability and inclusiveness more than ever before. The world today needs a new framework for global cooperation in order to preserve peace and accelerate progress. After the catalysm of the Second World War, leaders designed a set of institutions and structures to enable post-war world to trade, collaborate and avoid war. And looking at the present situation, faced with a changing as well a world full of challenges, today's leader must again undertake such a project with respect to rise of globalization 4.0. If the change is not addressed properly, once again quoting from World Economic Forum, then there will be negative implications like a further increase in unemployment and poverty crisis. The concept of globalization 4.0 seeks to address these issues and promote inclusive and sustainable growth. Dear learners, we hope the lecture on globalization 4.0, a case study of opportunities, presented to you significant inputs and insights. We look forward to positive, encouraging feedback from you all. Thank you very much